You love flying the Lake Central Way. Travel easy the Lake Central Way. For the best in fast connections, any time of night or day, make your next trip the Lake Central Way.
For more than a decade, this has been the focal point of the Lake Central Airlines story. Weir Cook Airport, Indianapolis, Indiana. Back in 1947 at this same airport, Colonel Roscoe Turner, aviation pioneer and holder of numerous trophies, filed an application for a local service certificate, allowing flights to 10 cities in 5 states. 2 years later, the first scheduled flight was made. Then in 1950, this newcomer in the world of aviation, with its 25 employees and 200 route miles, changed its name from Turner Airlines to one that's known by thousands of travelers throughout this area, Lake Central Airlines. This is the story of Lake Central Airlines today. It's a story of progress centered in the Great Lakes region, consisting of such states as Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and New York. For the next few minutes, then, enjoy a few pages from this story. See and hear individual chapters which feature the employees, their machines, and ideas woven into the fabric of Lake Central Airlines. You usually meet Lake Central Airlines by calling here. Your phone call is taken by these reservation agents who are specially trained to receive and answer all inquiries concerning your flight plans. In this room, they have at their fingertips information on the arrival and departure times of all flights on the Lake Central system and on all other airlines to which Lake Central Airlines can make connections. In addition, they can give you the space available on these same flights. Lake Central Airlines prides itself on the careful and thorough way each passenger's reservation is processed. And although this is only one room in one airline operation, the organizational setup makes it possible for fantastic things to come from it. Whatever your destination, Timbuktu or Terre Haute, your flight probably begins in the main lounge of a terminal. Airlines passengers waiting here may be anticipating flights to such Lake Central cities as Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Cleveland, Grand Rapids, or Danville, Illinois. While they wait, there is always much activity preceding the boarding time. When time for your departure approaches, Lake Central passengers are requested to walk to their plane, usually along a well-marked passage to the proper gate position, which itself is only a few short steps from the doorway of the plane. Presently, this is the type of aircraft used by Lake Central Airlines, a Douglas airplane designated DC-3, perfected during World War II, has one of the best safety records of any plane flown. Technically speaking, it is a twin-engine monoplane. The crew numbers 3, seating capacity 24 to 26 passengers. Why has Lake Central used DC-3s? For the answer, we determine the basic purpose of Lake Central Airlines. Lake Central flies from smaller cities to larger ones, bringing passengers to the trunk or cross-country airlines. Therefore, the plane they use must be capable of landing on and taking off from smaller airports. But the plane must also carry the maximum numbers of passengers with comfort and convenience. The aircraft which filled these requirements was the DC-3. But Lake Central Airlines does more than just bring you to larger airlines. Businessmen who previously had to rely on slower, less convenient commuter media now use Lake Central Airlines for business trips which many times can be made in the same day, such as from Lafayette to Chicago or from Lima, Ohio to Detroit. When you're seated, the Lake Central pilot radios the tower. He asks permission to begin his flight. The control tower, operated by the Federal Aviation Agency, tells the pilot to begin his preparations. Before he enters the out time of the flight, the pilot and co-pilot begin the checklist procedure. The religious use of checklist is one important reason why Lake Central Airlines has received year after year awards for maintaining perfect safety records. Generally speaking, the list includes a check of every operation dealing with the proper functioning of the aircraft. The co-pilot reads each item. The pilot repeats it verbally, then executes the instruction. No matter how trivial some instructions might seem to us, these men know how great their responsibility is. It's not their intention to lose a kingdom for want of a nail. These are a few of the items to be checked. Each dial and gauge on the control panel must be perfectly calibrated. The complex mechanism that steers the aircraft must respond exactly. The control column, the ailerons, the elevators, and the rudder. Your pilot is now completely satisfied that the mechanical components of his aircraft are sound. He starts the engine and reaches for its throttle. The 1,250 horsepower feels good to him. He knows that if necessary, this one engine can hold his plane in the air with a full complement of passengers. Engine 1 sounds good. Now to start engine 2. The procedure is repeated. During this phase, there is continual observation by Lake Central personnel inside and outside the airplane, because although the DC-3 is known as the world's safest airplane, Lake Central, like most other airlines, believes strongly in the ounce of prevention adage. The tower clears your Lake Central flight for takeoff. First, clearance to taxi. Granted. Throttles opened. You wheel across the apron. Slowly, deliberately, heading toward the runway. It begins with a surge of power. A slight pressure pushes you deeper into your seat. You see runway rush by and feel a subtle vibration of the fuselage. You're traveling faster on the ground than ever before. Then suddenly a detached feeling. The vibration stops. The runway is no longer there. You're airborne. In this freedom, ponder for a moment. How can this complex thing look so simple? Part of the answer lies here in the tower. The federal government employs the men who work here. They regulate all air traffic in their vicinity. They do a magnificent job. Unfortunately, not many realize it. In fact, so few realize it, there is a need today for more trained personnel to man these towers. The air age is growing, and with it the necessity for men to work at the essential tasks of getting planes into the air and onto the ground efficiently. Men with intelligence, endurance, and the ability to make quick and correct decisions. This is the chief tower operator. He is assisted by a supervisor of ground control, a recorder of flight data, and a controller of landings and departures. This can happen any time. Wind speed quickly changes. The wind direction meter points to trouble. Altimeter readings plus falling barometric pressure equals dirty weather. Pilots in the area and men in the tower switch to IFR, instrument flight rules. A low overcast and fine drizzle have blotted out visual contact with aircraft. A few years ago, this condition would have caused worry and concern. Today, the situation is met by men and electronics. This modern combination quietly and confidently performs its miracles around fog-bound airports using equipment which 20 years ago was seen only in dreams of highly ridiculed visionaries. One such piece of electronic gear, also a product of World War II, one which has made the transition to peacetime most gracefully, is radar. In bad weather, radar and the tower work as one. Now, air traffic is routed by watching and interpreting the glowing face of a radar screen. Each airport has a unique approach pattern. This man is watching and talking with a pilot somewhere near the airport. He talks directly to the pilot, gliding him through the overcast onto the glide path. Tape recorders turn continuously. More than a dozen conversations can be recorded at the same time. Each recorder tapes 4 of the 16 operation frequencies at Weircook Airport. The tapes are documents which can be listened to when procedures are violated. But such things as radar and tape recording are only 2 of the many safety factors enjoyed by Lake Central Airlines. There are innumerable navigation aids, among them 5 separate instrument landing facilities, continually double-checking each other. Planes, such as the Lake Central flight landing now, can do so with utmost confidence because there is an almost infallible combination of men and electronics which can reach through blinding weather and lead this airplane down to the substantial safety of runway and terminal. In this building, there are many factors contributing to the smooth and efficient accomplishment of Lake Central Airlines. These are the general offices of Lake Central Airlines, located at Weircook Airport in a modern setting which represents Indiana's only airline's home office. In these offices, the business of running a multi-million-dollar commercial enterprise takes place, a business which reaches such far-flung cities served by the airlines as Bloomington, Indiana, Erie, Pennsylvania, Kalamazoo, Michigan, and Zanesville, Ohio. The business section of Lake Central Airlines has 2 basic divisions, general accounting and revenue accounting. In general accounting, the office force is responsible for preparing the payroll, for accounts payable, and for the preparation of reports for both management and the Civil Aeronautics Board. In the Revenue Accounting Division, ticket auditing is done. The vast and complex interline billing is prepared, and statistical reports are readied for the management branch. The positions these employees occupy haven't the glamour of flying, but without them, no airline can get a plane in the air. Equally important, the management team, which includes an executive vice president, a director of public relations, a supervisor of purchasing and properties, and vice presidents in charge of operations and traffic and sales. Also prominent and welcome in the Lake Central business section is the field representative of the Civil Aeronautics Board, keeping a federal eye out to proper business practices. Lake Central Airlines must keep in close touch with its customers. This necessitates a printing facility as part of its office organization. The press is in almost continuous operation, turning out in color when needed everything Lake Central wants in printed matter except tickets and checks. The largest demand placed upon the press is for timetables. Lake Central Airlines is located in 2 time zones, which means that standard and daylight times are changed twice a year. In addition, Lake Central is bringing new cities into their schedules, which means more time changes and flight rerouting. This alone makes this seemingly unrelated piece of equipment very essential to the Lake Central operation. Immediately adjacent to the Lake Central business offices is its maintenance area. Here, the highly skilled work necessary to keeping the aircraft in a continued state of airworthiness is accomplished. The effectiveness of this skill is reflected in the numerous safety awards presented to Lake Central since its beginning. Lake Central Airlines has set its own maintenance standards which have been approved by the Federal Aviation Agency. In this hangar, which can easily accommodate 4 DC-3s at a time, there are over 100 men working at 5 highly specialized maintenance activities. For example, a general inspection after 125 hours flying time, an intermediate inspection after 250 hours, a heavy inspection and repair after 375 hours. Engines are overhauled at 1,300 hours. At 12,000 hours, the plane undergoes a major overhaul. which compares roughly to having your car inspected part by part from the rear license to the front grille. This happens each 1,200 hours, generator inspection and repair. There are 2 on each Lake Central plane. Both must function perfectly. However, it's reassuring to know that if one fails, the other can carry the entire electrical load. Jobs like painting and riveting are done when needed. Neither of them concerns mechanical operation. But when it comes to landing gear and their functioning, mechanics check them every 375 hours. Without radio communications, neither Lake Central nor any other airline could exist. Radio, air-to-air and ground-to-air, forms the indispensable link which brings order to airlines the world over. Lake Central Airlines has set up a facility in which engineers build and maintain all radio equipment used throughout their system. In addition to the equipment used on the planes, these men make and repair sets used in all Lake Central ground stations. Test equipment is located in this special room in the maintenance hangar. It's a shielded room through which no radio wave can pass. This ensures precise calibration. From here, men are sent to all Lake Central ground stations where, with portable testing devices, radio installations are inspected and, if necessary, repaired without the inconvenience of sending them to the home base. In essence, radio, as with so many other airlines' components, calls for trained personnel, highly skilled, working with the best and most modern equipment available. This represents a part of the Lake Central way. Another phase of the Lake Central way, one much more pleasant to view, is the Lake Central stewardess. These young ladies, more than any other group, form the link between Lake Central Airlines and their guests. This is a moment during the 2-week classroom training session undergone by each new group. Here they learn first aid, emergency procedures, traffic, governmental agencies, airline history, and equipment. After the classroom, the new group spends another week on the airplane itself. During this time, each new Lake Central stewardess makes 3 flights in the company of an experienced girl. Also during this time, she is instructed by the senior stewardess and by various company specialists. Lake Central Airlines is proud of the way it trains its stewardesses. Because of the comparatively few girls in each class, Lake Central Airlines can take more time with each young lady, not only showing her more thoroughly the routine tasks she must do, but pointing out to her and developing the individual personality traits which do so much for the stewardess in gaining the complete confidence of her passengers. This is most desirable for Lake Central Airlines since most of its passengers fly very frequently over the same routes. The flights are shorter in length than the trunk lines, which means that if the passenger's comfort is to be complete, the rapport between passenger and stewardess should be established that much sooner. Training is a continuous thing for Lake Central Airlines pilots. Periodically, the chief pilot calls a meeting at which new procedures are discussed. Changes and additions to flight rules come in. New routes must be learned. Lessons in weather study must be read. Traffic control and traffic procedures must be absorbed. New approaches for new cities are analyzed. Everything which will determine a safe landing and takeoff is considered. Even a request from a mink farmer who asks pilots to avoid the area above his property. The roar disturbs the habits of his animals. Every month or so, a Lake Central pilot is told to report to the link trainer. This object, familiar to almost everyone, is a complex simulated aircraft cockpit. Its purpose is to allow the pilot to undergo blind flying while he is on the ground. Once he enters, he has no contact with the outside other than a telephone line which resembles a radio setup. When he is buttoned up inside the craft, he is given a series of exercises or drills similar to actual conditions and situations he'll encounter in the air during total instrument flying. Most flight conditions are duplicated. The pilot sits in darkness with only dim instrument lights dotting the monotonous blackness. He hears the muffled roar of two engines. He feels the vibration of the fuselage. Through the earphones, he may hear any of 14 different atmospheric radio conditions. And through the whole thing, he must carry out the orders he hears in the background. Before he enters the cockpit and pulls the hood over him, he has no idea what area his tests will cover. When the problem is set up, the pilot begins to solve it through concentration and accuracy. Concentration on the overall situation and accurate reading and interpreting of his instruments. The progress of this pilot is plotted by a circular device moving slowly over a 360-degree graph. Each move the plane makes is clearly visible as an inked parabola left by the marker. Watching the path of this imaginary flight is a young lady thoroughly familiar with link operation. She is the only voice the pilot hears during the entire tests. The pilot asks further instruction. He's told to reduce speed. He's on his glide path. During critical moments, the girl can tell by indicator lights how well the pilot is doing. She has a duplicate set of instruments. The lights flash if the pilot miscalculates. The pilot is informed of the completion of the test. He is told he may leave the trainer. Through careful study of the graph and report of the attendant, this pilot's proficiency can be evaluated. So far, we've seen several phases of Lake Central activity which hinge upon communication. Its most vital part is played here in the communication center. Contact with the entire Lake Central system is maintained from this room. Information concerning reservations, flight movement reports, weather, and general office messages flow constantly through a network of teletype cables. 60% of these messages deal with reservations. In 1 month, 52,000 are handled, placing the monthly total of messages near 100,000. Each item is transcribed onto perforated tape, then fed into a transmitter. Its electrical impulses are received at all of the stations in the system. Before takeoff, each Lake Central crew member reports to flight control. This is the realm in which the dispatcher reigns supreme. The dispatcher is looked upon by Lake Central crews as a mother hen, and so he is. From his office comes pre-flight information for pilot, co-pilot, and stewardess. After an individual crew assembles, they spend about an hour with the dispatcher and his assistants. During this time, they study the flight plan, which is the Bible, so to speak, of each plane's route. After completion of this flight plan, it will be submitted to Air Route Traffic Control for approval and subsequent issuance of flight clearance. In addition, the dispatcher's office interprets weather maps compiled by the United States Weather Bureau in Washington, D.C., and sent 3 every hour to this office. The man in charge is the chief dispatcher. His responsibilities include the training and supervision of his staff. He also must continually improve or modify procedures which affect the control and operation of flights. He must coordinate with local and federal agencies which govern airport and aircraft procedures and issue memos and bulletins for all company personnel concerning procedures. He is also given the task of preparing, analyzing, and monitoring the manuals and specifications dealing with takeoffs, en route, and landing rules which flight crews must follow. The Lake Central dispatcher is charged with pre-flight planning. He supplies all the information necessary for safe completion of the flight. He also monitors the progress of each flight, providing for the crew the instructions and information necessary for continued flight safety. Cancellations or rerouting of a flight is done by the dispatcher if he or the flight captain believes it necessary. In other words, dispatchers fit the picture, as do all other phases of the Lake Central operation. They blend into a vast and complex system, which leads to a smooth running and safe mode of transportation. Thus far, our story has found these factors: safety and efficiency common to all parts of Lake Central Airlines activity. We have seen it in the reservations office, the terminal, in tower procedures, in landing aids, business offices, maintenance shops, and in pilot and stewardess training. Let's talk about the future of Lake Central Airlines. Let's see how Lake Central is taking its passengers through the gateway to the jet age. From the point of view of the Lake Central route structure, the transcontinental airlines are now flying jets at about 30,000 feet at speeds near 600 miles an hour. These planes obviously cannot economically fly short distances. Therefore, it is estimated that cities now served by Lake Central Airlines will ultimately double in number. What types of aircraft is Lake Central planning to use? It has been determined that the Lake Central route structure calls for the use of turboprop aircraft on the majority of flights. Ultimately, Lake Central Airlines will afford the travelers downtown-to-downtown service through the use of vertical takeoff planes. What is the future financial picture for Lake Central Airlines? In years ahead, it is estimated that Lake Central Airlines will not require federal funds to help finance its operation. And as a result, Lake Central will return substantial dividends to its investors. In a few moments, this film will end. But the Lake Central story is only beginning. Experts foresee in the jet age Lake Central Airlines enjoying its finest hour.
For the best in fast connections, any time of night or day, make your next trip the Lake Central way. So let's travel the Lake Central way. Flying easy, the Lake Central way. It's the gateway to the jet age without trouble or delay. Make your next trip the Lake Central way.